Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take those crucial sources you send our way, really dig into them, and pull out what matters, the actionable insights, sometimes the surprising stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're tackling something pretty intense. It's personal, high stakes, affects mental health, family dynamics, even long-term careers. We're diving into academic pressure and those unrealistic parental expectations.
Yeah, it's a minefield for a lot of families.
We've got a solid stack of research here. Articles, psych studies, educational reports. They're all focused on that, very fine line between being a supportive parent and, well, pushing too hard, creating that pressure cooker environment.
Right.
So our mission today is frankly complex. It's not just about saying, yeah, this problem exists.
Yeah.
I think most of us see the symptoms, right?
Mm-hmm. People feel it.
We need to go deeper, understand the roots, cultural, psychological, look at the theory, like why does this approach actually backfire so often? And most importantly, pull together a really detailed toolkit, evidence-based solutions to actually change things.
And that change, that transformation is absolutely key here. The sources are really clear. Parental involvement, crucial. We're not arguing against that.
No, definitely not.
But we are exploring that exact point where supportive involvement kind of twists into what the material calls a harmful performance obsession.
Performance obsession.
Yeah. It's where marks, ranks, getting into that prestigious program, it all starts to matter more than actual learning, curiosity, or the kid's emotional health. It's all sacrificed for those measurable results.
Which is tragic because it often ends up undermining the very future everyone's so worried about.
Exactly. A really damaging trade-off.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting right at the beginning, what is this harmful pressure? We need to define it clearly. When does involvement cross that line? So source one gives us a pretty formal definition, and it draws a critical distinction. It says, harmful pressure is the excessive academic demands parents place on their children. Okay, that seems clear, but here's the key part. Often without considering the child's actual aptitude, interests, or pace of learning.
Mm-hmm. That last bit is everything. The demands are disconnected from who the child actually is.
Right. It's not tailored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of healthy involvement like scaffolding, helping the child build their own structure, reach higher. But harmful pressure isn't scaffolding. It's a demand for a specific outcome, an outcome that might be totally unrealistic or just, not what the child is geared towards.
So the source identifies the shift point.
Yeah, pinpoints it. It's when the focus becomes all about the marks, the ranks, constantly comparing them to their friends or cousins.
The comparison trap.
Right, and those external things start to outweigh genuine understanding, critical thinking, or just being emotionally okay.
And the immediate psychological fallout from that shift, source one says it's profound.
Oh, absolutely. For the student, learning just stops being about discovery or growth. Suddenly, it's just a burden.
Just something they have to do.
Yeah, and that breeds anxiety, a constant, sometimes really crippling fear of failure. Because getting a bad mark isn't just, oh, I need to study that topic more. It means letting down the most important people in their life.
That's intense.
It really is, and it just crushes their intrinsic motivation, that natural drive to learn. They stop asking, what am I curious about?
And start asking.
What grade do I need to get so my parents aren't angry or disappointed?
Oof. And once that natural curiosity gets stamped out, trying to get it back must be incredibly hard.
Extremely difficult, which is why we have to look at the roots, the why behind this pressure, because it's this really tangled mix of psychological drivers in the parents, deep cultural beliefs, and just stressful environments.
Right. Understanding the cause is the only way to find a real solution.
Exactly. You can't just treat the symptom.
Okay, let's dive into those roots now. Because the complexity explains why just telling parents don't pressure your kids doesn't really work, does it? Hashtag take B. The deep roots of expectations causes reason source two.
Yeah, it's much deeper than that. Our sources kind of group the causes nicely. Let's start with the psychological and parental factors. These are often quite poignant, driven by some complex emotional stuff.
Okay, what's first?
The sources highlight something called vicarious ambition. It sounds heavy, and it is.
Vicarious, meaning living through someone else.
Precisely. It's when parents try to fulfill their own unachieved dreams or ambitions through their children. Maybe they wanted to be a doctor but couldn't, so now their child must become one.
Wow, so the child is basically carrying the weight of the parent's past regrets.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to build their own legacy, but using the child as the building material. It puts this immense burden on the kid for dreams that were never theirs. Think about the parent who, I don't know, dreamed of being a concert pianist but ended up in finance.
And now their kid has piano lessons 5 times a week, whether they like it or not.
Right. Regardless of talent, regardless of interest, the child's life path gets dictated by the ghost of the parent's past.
And this often goes hand in hand with perfectionism.
Yes, very often. It's this rigid belief some parents have. Perfect grades automatically equal a perfect, secure life. Full stop.
Like a magic formula. A plus, guaranteed success.
Exactly. Which is, a completely false equation, but it puts this unbearable pressure on every single test, every assignment. Each one becomes a high-stakes gamble for their entire future.
But it's not just internal hopes driving this, is it? The sources mention fear, too.
Huge factor, the social fear. This intense worry about what other people will think. Relatives, other parents at the school gate, the wider community.
Judging them based on their kid's report card.
The pressure moves outside the home. Parents feel they have to push their kids harder and harder to protect themselves from criticism or, feeling like they've failed in front of their peers.
Wow. So it's partly about their own social standing.
Often, yeah. And this anxiety gets amplified by something else the sources point out. A basic lack of child psychology awareness.
Meaning they just don't understand how kids learn differently.
Pretty much. Many parents aren't really aware of the huge diversity in learning styles or neurodiversity or just normal developmental stages. They apply this kind of rigid, maybe outdated, one-size-fits-all approach.
So they might miss that their kid is brilliant spatially
Yeah.
or incredibly empathetic.
Exactly. Because those things aren't measured well by standard tests. They might only see the struggle with, say, rote memorization and assume the child just isn't trying hard enough, rather than thinking maybe they learn differently.
That really does set up a perfect storm inside the family. Okay, let's zoom out a bit, because it's not just happening in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Society plays a role.
Oh, absolutely. The cultural and social factors really amplify this. Think about our exam-centric education systems.
Where grades are king?
Pretty much. Societies that put this massive emphasis on grades, on that single measurable number over practical skills or creativity or emotional intelligence. Well, that naturally ramps up parental anxiety. If the system tells you grades are the only key to opportunity.
Then parents feel like they have to demand those grades. It seems logical from their perspective.
Right. And this ties into those cultural notions of prestige. Our sources talk about how society often narrows down what counts as a successful career.
Yeah, like only doctor, lawyer, engineer are seen as truly respectable.
Exactly. That traditional narrow slice of high prestige professions. If society sends the message that only these paths mean success, parents internalize that and push their kids in that direction, often ignoring other perfectly valid, maybe even better suited options.
Even if the kid is passionate about something completely different.
And then there are the peer comparison networks. We can't underestimate these.
You mean like the parent WhatsApp groups? Or conversations at family gatherings?
Yes, those informal chats where competitiveness just escalates. One parent mentions their kid's got 3 tutors and an internship.
And suddenly the parent listening feels intense pressure to match or beat that.
Immediately. Even if it makes no sense for their own child's needs or personality, it becomes this kind of localized academic arms race, fueled by comparing notes.
It really is. Anxiety driven by keeping up with the Joneses, academically speaking. Okay, so that's the environment. What about how the student reacts or contributes to this cycle?
Well, a major issue is the breakdown in low communication. Kids learn really fast that being honest about struggling in school, well, it doesn't lead to support.
It leads to lectures, criticism, more pressure.
Exactly. So they clam up, they hesitate to share, or they might even lie about how they're doing. And that just destroys trust right when they need that connection the most.
That's heartbreaking. And the visible sign we see everywhere, the overstructured schedule.
Oh, yeah. Constant tuition, extra classes, coaching centers, back-to-back activities with absolutely zero room for just downtime.
Play, relaxation, doing nothing.
Exactly. The very things that are actually essential for consolidating learning, for creativity, for mental health. It's ironic, isn't it? The packed schedule meant to help actually hinders development. When do they even get to process anything?
Or just be a kid.
Right. And lastly, the sources mention the damage done by inconsistent feedback.
What does that mean exactly? Like hot and cold?
Pretty much. Parents swinging wildly between intense criticism when marks are low and then over-the-top praise when they're high. You get an A, you're brilliant. You get a B the next week, You're lazy. You're wasting your potential.
That sounds like emotional whiplash.
It is, and it makes the child's sense of self-worth totally conditional. It's entirely tied to that last grade. There's no stable foundation of, I'm valued regardless.
Hold on.
So, okay, we've laid out all these causes like vicarious ambition, social fear, packed schedules, inconsistent feedback. It's a lot. But you might be thinking, okay, I see the problems, but is this just like common sense? Or is there actual science explaining why this high-pressure thing consistently fails?
Right. Is there a deeper framework here?
Absolutely. And the answer is yes. This isn't just anecdotal. Decades of psychological theory actually predict and explain why this approach backfires.
Okay, let's get into that. Where do we start? Identity. Yay. Identity and autonomy, source 4.
Yeah, let's start there. Think about Erikson's psychosocial theory. Way back in 1968, he talked about adolescence as this crucial stage. Identity versus role confusion.
Finding out who you are versus being confused about your place in the world.
Exactly. Now, the sources connect this directly. When you have excessive parental control during these critical teen years, dictating every subject, every activity, the career path, it fundamentally messes with that search for identity.
How can you figure out who you are if someone else is constantly telling you who you should be?
You can't. The parent basically provides the entire script. The teenager doesn't get the chance to explore, to try things out, to fail, to figure out their own values or passions outside of what's expected. It leads straight to self-doubt, confusion. They end up feeling like actors in someone else's play.
Unable to write their own lines. #BD. Motivation and control. Source 4. And feeling like an actor probably doesn't do much for motivation.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Which brings us neatly to self-determination theory, or SDT, Deci and Ryan, back in 1985. This theory is huge for understanding what really drives people from within.
Intrinsic motivation, right. Doing something because you find it interesting or satisfying.
Exactly. And SDT says that kind of motivation needs 3 basic psychological ingredients to thrive: autonomy, competence, and relatedness.
Okay, autonomy, feeling like you have choices. Control. Competence, feeling like you're capable. Relatedness, feeling connected to others.
Now, the sources hammer this point. Parental over-control directly attacks and erodes autonomy.
Because you don't feel like you have any choice.
Right. If your choices are made for you, your time is managed down to the minute, your study methods are dictated, you lose that sense of self-direction, that feeling of, I'm choosing to do this.
So the motivation shifts.
Okay.
It's no longer, I want to learn this.
It becomes purely external, transactional. I have to do this to get the grade, or I have to do this to avoid punishment, or I have to do this to make my parents happy.
And when that external pressure is gone, maybe they get into college, what happens to the motivation?
It often just evaporates. Because the internal engine was never built, the drive was always powered from the outside. #C. Self-belief and persistence, source 4.
Then there's the third theoretical piece. Bandura's self-efficacy theory from 1977.
Self-efficacy. That's basically your belief in your own ability to succeed at something.
Spot on. It's that I can do this feeling. Now remember that inconsistent feedback, the constant criticism when results aren't perfect?
Yeah.
Bandura's theory explains why that's so damaging. Constant criticism drastically lowers a child's perceived competence, their self-efficacy.
So even if the parent thinks they're motivating the kid to try harder by pointing out flaws,
Although the child actually hears and internalizes is, I'm not good enough. My best effort still falls short. Wow. And that lowered self-belief must affect how much they're willing to keep trying when things get tough.
directly impacts persistence. Why would you keep battling a difficult math problem or revising a tough essay if you're already convinced you're probably going to fail anyway, or that even if you succeed, it won't be good enough?
It leads to giving up more easily.
Or worse, a state psychologists call learned helplessness, where you just stop trying altogether because you feel like nothing you do makes a difference. You expect failure. #D. The real-world data, source 4.
Okay, so the theories line up. Erikson on identity, SDT on motivation, Bandura on self-belief. But what about the real world? Does the data show this happening on a large scale?
Oh, unequivocally. And the numbers are pretty sobering. Look at the WHO, the World Health Organization, their 2021 Adolescent Health Report.
What did it find?
It found that nearly 1 in 3 students in these highly competitive school systems experience moderate to severe stress. And it's linked directly back to parental expectations.
1 in 3, that's huge. We're talking millions of kids.
Millions, whose primary source of chronic stress isn't necessarily external hardship, but the pressure coming from within their own homes. It's staggering.
It really reframes it as a public health issue, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And it's gotten so bad that educational bodies are formally stepping in. Our sources mention the NSERT guidelines from 2023, that's the National Council of Educational Research and Training in India, a major body.
And then what do their guidelines say?
They state very clearly that parental over-involvement leads to anxiety and burnout, not improvement in learning outcomes.
Wow. So it's official recognition. This strategy is counterproductive.
Exactly. It moves beyond parental worry or anecdotes. It's an established educational warning. High pressure might feel like active parenting, but the evidence shows it actively harms learning and mental health in the long run. Hashtag 3 collars. Symptoms, indicators, and consequences.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical for anyone listening. Maybe you're a student feeling this, maybe you're a teacher seeing it, maybe you're a parent wondering if you're contributing. How do you actually spot this harmful pressure in action?
Right. What are the red flags? Our sources break down the symptoms and behaviors from a couple of key viewpoints.
Let's start with the student's perspective. What are they feeling and showing? Hashtag A symptoms and behavioral indicators. Source 3.
Okay, from the student side, the signs are often pervasive and really debilitating. A big one is a persistent, almost constant fear of their parents' reaction to grades.
Not just normal pretest nerves, but something deeper.
Much deeper. It's like this background hum of anxiety that shapes how they study, who they talk to, their general mood. It's always there.
And what about when they actually get their results back?
You often see really strong, maybe seemingly disproportionate emotional reactions right after getting marks. Things like shutting down completely, becoming intensely irritable, or bursting into tears over a grade that, objectively, might not even be that bad.
Because the grade isn't just a grade.
It feels like a verdict on their worth, or a predictor of the conflict coming at home. Their emotional security feels threatened.
Does this stress show up physically too?
Very often. The sources list clear physical manifestations. Chronic headaches, feeling tired all the time even if they sleep, stomach problems, maybe losing their appetite.
So the body is reacting to the mental stress.
Exactly. These are often psychosomatic symptoms, real physical issues caused or aggravated by psychological distress. And another really sad indicator.
What's that?
A hesitation to express interests that don't align with what the parents expect. They learn to silence their own passions.
So if they secretly love art, but the parents are pushing for engineering?
They just stop talking about art. They know it won't be seen as valuable or useful in the parents' eyes, so they bury it.
That's a huge loss.
It really is. And it all leads to this fundamental shift. Studying becomes just an act to please the parents or to get that external pat on the back. It stops being about actually wanting to learn something.
So learning becomes a performance, not a process.
Perfectly put. A performance designed to hit a metric, completely disconnected from genuine curiosity.
Okay, so that's what the student might be showing. What about teachers? What do they see in the classroom?
Teachers are often on the front lines of seeing this. They notice excessive anxiety before tests or assessments. Kids who are visibly shaking, maybe nauseous, before even a minor quiz.
More than just typical butterflies.
Way more. They also see those disproportionate emotional reactions to small setbacks. A slightly lower score on one assignment can trigger what looks like a full-blown crisis for some students because the perceived stakes are just astronomically high in their minds.
What else do teachers pick up on?
An overdependence on external approval. These students are constantly seeking praise, asking, is this good? Is this right? They need that validation from the teacher or peers because they haven't developed their own internal sense of accomplishment or quality.
They can't judge their own work. They need someone else to tell them it's okay.
And critically, teachers often report a noticeable decline in creativity and academic risk-taking.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. If the goal is perfection at all costs, to avoid that negative reaction at home, why would you try a novel approach to a problem? Or explore a tangent? Or argue an unconventional point in an essay?
Because it might not work out perfectly. It might lead to a lower grade temporarily.
Exactly. So they stick to the safest, most predictable path to get the A. Even if it's boring, even if it means not really stretching themselves intellectually, innovation takes a backseat to safety. Hashtag B. Impact and long-term consequences. Source 5.
Okay, so we see the symptoms, but the sources are really clear. This isn't just a temporary phase, right? This chronic pressure has serious, long-lasting consequences.
Absolutely. This isn't just tough high school years. The damage can ripple outwards for a long, long time. The most immediate one is often academic burnout.
Just complete exhaustion.
Yeah, mental and physical exhaustion from being under that constant, relentless tension. They just run out of steam. And this burnout often leads to a major loss of that intrinsic motivation we talked about. It makes transitioning to university or a career really hard because they haven't learned how to drive their own learning.
And what about the family itself?
Devastating impact there. We see an erosion of trust and deeply strained relationships. Those communication gaps that started when the child felt they couldn't be honest, they often widen and can become permanent. The child learns that vulnerability isn't safe.
So they stop turning to their parents for support, just when they might need it most.
Precisely. And the most alarming consequence, according to the sources, is the potential for severe emotional fallout.
This goes beyond just stress.
Way beyond. Prolonged chronic pressure isn't a motivator. The sources basically frame it as toxic. It's linked to serious, clinically significant emotional disorders, chronic anxiety, depression, even severe psychosomatic issues that need professional help.
We're talking actual mental health diagnoses.
Yes. And finally, there's the long-term tragedy of career mismatch.
Students ending up in jobs they hate.
Exactly. Because they chose a field only to meet parental expectations, ignoring their own real interests or talents. They might achieve the external markers of success, the degree, the job title, but inside they feel deeply dissatisfied, unhappy. It often leads to a major identity crisis later in life, that feeling of, whose life am I actually living? Okay, so hearing all that, the causes, the symptoms, the grim consequences, it naturally raises the big question, what can actually be done? How do we break this cycle?
Right. Is there hope? Are there concrete steps?
Yes, definitely. And the good news is our sources provide a really detailed, multi-pronged toolkit. Strategies for everyone involved, the student, the parents, and even the school system. Hashtag tag A. Student self-help and reflection, source 6A.
Let's start with the student who's feeling crushed by these expectations right now. What can they do to regain some control?
The sources suggest the first step is often trying to reclaim some agency. A key recommendation is initiating open dialogue, and this is important, doing it calmly.
Meaning, don't try to have this conversation right after a bad grade comes out and emotions are high.
Exactly. Plan a time to talk when things are relatively calm. Focus on expressing the challenges being faced rather than just complaining about the pressure. Frame it constructively.
What else?
Developing clarity of purpose. This means getting clear in their own mind, and then assertively expressing their genuine interests, what subjects actually excite them, what pathways feel right, even if they're different from what's expected.
So it's not just, I hate physics, but I'm really passionate about environmental science, and here's why.
Precisely. It requires articulating an alternative vision, not just rejecting the current one. And on a very practical level, the sources suggest tactical goal setting.
How does that help with overwhelming expectations?
It's about breaking down those huge, often vague parental goals like get straight A's or get into an Ivy League school into much smaller, more manageable, realistic steps.
Like focusing on the next test, not the final transcript.
Exactly. Maybe the goal becomes understand this chapter thoroughly or improve my score on the next quiz by 5%. It makes the pressure feel less crushing by focusing on achievable short-term wins.
Yeah, makes sense. Shifting the focus.
And crucially, students need to actively cultivate the power of self-validation. This is huge.
Meaning learning to praise themselves internally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Learning to appreciate their own effort, the process of learning, the progress they make independent of the grade or external approval. Effort has to become its own reward. They need to be able to say to themselves, okay, the grade wasn't perfect, but I really worked hard on that, and I understand it better now.
That's detaching self-worth from the outcome.
Exactly. And finally, on a basic level, prioritizing mandatory balance. Building a routine that deliberately carves out time for fun, for rest, for exercise, for hobbies completely unrelated to academics.
Treating downtime not as wasted time, but as essential maintenance.
Absolutely essential. It's proactive burnout prevention. Hashtag B. Parental awareness and behavioral change. Source 6B.
Okay, so that's for the students. What about the parents? What changes do the sources recommend for them? This seems like the toughest part, maybe.
It requires real self-reflection, definitely. The sources say the change has to start with fundamentally reframing success, moving away from just the outcome.
So focusing less on the A grade itself.
Yes. And instead, learning to consistently praise effort, not just outcome. This fosters what psychologists call a growth mindset. Instead of, wow, an A, you're so smart, Try saying, I saw how long you wrestled with that tricky problem. The persistence you showed there was really impressive. Or, you put so much work into studying for that. I'm proud of your dedication.
So you're praising the process, the qualities they demonstrated, regardless of the final mark.
Exactly. It validates the work, not just the result. And linked to this is understanding and appreciating diversity in learning.
Getting away from that one-size-fits-all metric we talked about.
Right. The sources suggest introducing concepts like Gardner's multiple intelligences. This framework helps parents see that competence isn't just about math or language skills. A child might excel in music, or interpersonal skills, or understanding nature.
And those are equally valid forms of intelligence and competence.
Absolutely. Recognizing that helps parents value the child for who they are, not just how they score on tests. Another huge one. Avoiding comparison.
Just stop comparing them to siblings, cousins, friends, kids.
Completely. Full stop. The focus needs to be exclusively on the child's own progress compared to their own past performance. Ask, how did you improve since last time? Not, what did Priya get? Comparison is toxic. It fuels anxiety and resentment.
That takes conscious effort, especially with those peer networks buzzing.
It does. Parents also need to actively encourage autonomy. Look for opportunities, even small ones, to let the child make age-appropriate academic choices.
Like choosing an elective course,
Mm.
or deciding which homework to do first.
Yes, or even just picking their own study playlist. Giving them small zones of control helps rebuild that sense of ownership over their learning, which fuels intrinsic motivation.
It sounds like it builds trust, too.
It does. And all of this really rests on one fundamental principle: providing emotional safety. Meaning the child must know deep down, absolutely without question, that their parents' love and acceptance are unconditional, not tied to their grades, not dependent on their performance. They need to feel secure that even if they mess up, even if they fail, they are still loved and valued for who they are. That's the bedrock. ######C. Teacher and school interventions. Source 6C.
Okay, so students have steps, parents have major shifts to make. What role do schools and teachers play in breaking this cycle? They're caught in the middle often.
They have a critical systemic role. The sources recommend proactive education, but aimed at the parents.
Like parent workshops.
Exactly. Mandatory parent counseling sessions or workshops specifically about adolescent development, the psychology of stress, realistic expectations, and understanding different learning styles. Often, parents are pressuring because they genuinely don't know another way, or they don't understand the developmental impact.
So educating the parents is key. What else can schools do systemically?
A big one is changing metrics, moving away from solely relying on numerical ranks or grades, especially public rankings, which just breed comparison and shame.
What's the alternative?
Shifting towards more qualitative, feedback-based reporting, giving detailed narrative feedback on strengths, areas for growth, effort, progress. That changes the whole conversation from what rank did you get to what did you learn and what's the next step.
Focus on learning, not just sorting.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Schools also need robust systemic support, like strong career guidance programs, and these need to start early, not just in the final year.
To help kids explore options before the pressure gets too intense.
And to help parents see the wide range of viable paths, aligning expectations with actual aptitude and interest, rather than just chasing those few prestigious careers.
Broadening the definition of success again.
Yes. Which leads to the final point for schools. Actively promote balance. This means the school culture itself needs to recognize and celebrate more than just top marks.
Like celebrating leadership,
Yeah.
creativity, community service, empathy.
Exactly. When the school visibly values these well-rounded achievements alongside academics, it sends a powerful message to both students and parents that success is multidimensional. Being a good person, a contributor, is just as important as being a top scorer. ###D, long-term growth and resilience strategies, source 60.
Okay, those are great interventions. But what about building lasting change? Habit for the long haul.
For sustained change, the sources suggest building new routines and skills. One idea is a family reflection routine.
Like a weekly check-in.
Yeah, maybe a short meeting each week focused specifically on feelings, well-being, maybe something interesting learned. But, and this is key, explicitly excluding any discussion of marks or scores during that time. Creating a dedicated space for connection that isn't about performance.
Protecting that time.
And for the student, building resilience is paramount. This isn't about just toughing it out. It's about actively teaching coping skills.
What kind of skills?
Things like deep breathing techniques to manage anxiety in the moment, journaling to process stressful thoughts, learning positive but realistic self-talk to counter negative spirals. It's about giving them tools to manage the stress, not just endure it. Turn stress from a catastrophe into a challenge they can navigate.
Empowering them.
Exactly. And finally, fostering community awareness. Schools and community groups can play a role here by hosting talks or discussions around the theme of progress over perfection.
Normalizing the idea that learning is a journey, not just a destination score.
Right. When parents hear this message reinforced externally from experts or other parents, it can help them feel less isolated in resisting that competitive pressure cooker, less worried about falling behind if they ease up a bit. It provides community validation for a healthier approach. Hashtag V, the listener's takeaway toolkit.
Okay, this has been incredibly detailed. We've gone from the deep theory to very practical strategies. So for you listening right now, maybe feeling caught in this, what are the immediate takeaways? The tools you can use drawn from these sources. Hashtag JK. Self-assessment and reflection, source 7.
The sources suggest starting with a quick, honest self-check. Think about your current situation and mentally rate yourself, say, from 1 to 5 on these 4 key things. Ready?
Totally minus.
First, how open do you feel you can be about your academic struggles with your family? 1 being not at all, 5 being completely open.
Okay.
Second,
How much does your family seem to value your effort separate from the actual result? 1 little value on effort, 5 high value.
got it. Third, to what extent do you feel you're studying because you want to learn versus just meeting external expectations? 1 mostly external, 5 mostly internal.
And the last one.
Fourth, how emotionally supported do you feel by your family immediately after you make a mistake or get a disappointing result? 1 not supported, criticized, 5 fully supported.
Okay, so rating yourself on openness, value of effort, internal motivation, and support after mistakes.
And the sources suggest if you're consistently scoring low, like 1s or 2s on these, well, that's a clear signal. It flags specific areas where you really need to think about initiating dialogue, maybe seeking external support, or where a shift in perspective or behavior is urgently needed. It's like your personal diagnostic. Hashtag B. The expectation versus reality chart, source 7B.
I like that diagnostic. Now, the sources also mentioned a very concrete exercise, didn't they? Something to actually facilitate that difficult conversation.
Yes. The expectation versus reality chart. Super practical. You literally take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle.
2 columns.
2 columns. In the first column, you write, what my parents expect of me this term, and be really honest and specific. Is it straight A's, a specific rank, getting into a certain club? Write it down.
Okay, column 1, the expectations.
Then in the second column, you write, what I can realistically achieve this term. This requires brutal honesty with yourself. Consider your time, your current understanding, other commitments, what's actually feasible without burning out.
Column 2, the reality check.
Exactly. Now, the power isn't just filling it out. The crucial, maybe difficult next step is using this chart as a basis for a conversation with your family.
Do you bring the chart to them?
You could. Or just use it to structure your thoughts. It shifts the discussion away from vague disappointment or impossible demands towards something tangible. It grounds the conversation in reality and allows for negotiating a shared, achievable plan. It directly counters that vicarious ambition by putting reality on the table. Hashtag C. Healthy adaptability habits, source 7C and D. Finally, the sources give some very specific daily and weekly habits to help break the stress cycle. Little things that add up.
Like what?
First, religiously schedule family time that is completely unrelated to academics. Movie night, a walk, playing a game, whatever it is, protect that time. Rule, no school talk allowed.
Create a safe zone for connection.
Second, maybe start the day with a focused daily affirmation. Something simple but powerful, like repeating to yourself, my worth is not defined by my marks.
Saying it until you internalize it, like a mental shield against the pressure.
Exactly. It's a psychological inoculation. And third, shift your weekly reflection. Instead of just looking back at scores, consciously focus on learning gains and growth. What new concept clicked this week? What problem did you solve that felt hard at first? What are you proud of learning?
Focusing on the process and progress, not just the final grade.
Precisely. It retrains your brain and hopefully the family conversation to value the journey of learning itself. Hashtag Haltro.
Wow, okay, that was a really deep dive. We went from defining this harmful academic pressure, tracing its roots in culture and psychology, exploring the theories like autonomy and self-efficacy that explain why it backfires.
And then moved into a pretty comprehensive set of solutions, practical steps for students, big shifts needed from parents, and the role schools have to play.
Yeah, we covered a lot. Why that relentless pursuit of perfection often leads straight to burnout, low self-esteem, and just doubt.
And understanding those root causes, the vicarious dreams, the social fears, how autonomy gets crushed, that understanding really is the first necessary step towards reclaiming genuine learning and, frankly, emotional well-being for students caught in this.
Absolutely. Thank you for sending in these sources and for trusting us to navigate this really complex and often painful topic with you. But hey, before we wrap up, let's leave you with one final thought to chew on. It builds on everything we discussed about rankings, prestige, career paths.
Right. So the source material, especially the WHO data, makes it crystal clear that relying solely on academic metrics often leads to widespread anxiety and burnout. And we know these metrics don't always predict real-world competence or long-term happiness very well.
Yeah, the correlation isn't as strong as we think.
So here's the provocative question. If the current metrics are causing harm and aren't even the best predictors, what entirely new measures should we families, schools, maybe even society adopt? Measures focused perhaps on observable skills like problem-solving competence, demonstrated curiosity, emotional regulation, adaptability. How could we really define and measure a truly successful, well-adjusted student beyond the transcript?
What would that look like in practice? That's
Yeah.
definitely something to mull over, explore on your own.
Food for thought.
Indeed. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.